Hello everybody, just done quite a big game of Never Mind the Billhooks, Wars of the Roses on the table here, so I thought I'd give you a bit of an overview of the battle that we've tried to recreate and what it was in real history, and then briefly go over how it went down in miniature. So this is a recreation of the Battle of Blore Heath, which was fought in September 1459 in Staffordshire between these guys, which is a Yorkist rebel army under the command of the Earl of Salisbury, this chap, who were trying to get to the southwest of England down that road to meet up with the Duke of York's forces to create a much larger army to challenge the king, who was Henry VI. And they were intercepted by this lot, which is a large but inexperienced army commanded by James Tuchet, Lord Audley, who's the chap with the massive flag in the middle there. The king and queen aren't actually present, so this is like an advance force that was sent to intercept the Yorkists on their way down. And it happened in a valley with a watercourse running through the middle of it, which these days is called the Hempshill Brook. And the whole point of this battle was basically that royal army was charged with stopping, capturing, killing this Yorkist force led by Salisbury to prevent the two forces that were in the ascendancy for York at the time from meeting up and potentially causing huge problems. So this army is quite interesting, the Yorkists, because they're smaller, but they've got a lot more experience in their ranks on the day. They were probably outnumbered by as much as 2 to 1 though. This army is much larger, contains an awful lot more cavalry, but is less experienced. The terrain's interesting because you've got the road which the Yorkists were originally going to try and cross over the brook in the ford in the middle there and keep on going down to the southwest. The Lancastrians basically encamped themselves across the top of the hill on the opposite side of the valley, so they were here first, so they had the higher ground. In real life, in inverted commas, the Yorkists saw that the Lancastrian army was there, so they weren't, the element of surprise wasn't fully with the Lancastrians, and it's suggested by historic England, and I tend to agree with them, that the Yorkists probably had enough time to stake in their archers either side, which they've done there in a sort of Agincourt fashion. Salisbury had experience in France, so he would have seen this tactic used relatively recently, particularly when he got smaller numbers against a larger force. And they also, because their right flank had nothing to pin it against really, they used their wagon train and created what's known as a wagon lager, which is basically a fort of overturned wagons to create an obstacle so it's harder to outflank you. And their left wing over there was pinned against a wood. Lancastrians basically formed up on the opposite side and had quite a lot of nobility among their ranks, which are represented in terms of sort of commanders for sort of Billhooks style by Lord Dudley with the green flag there, Audley in the centre, commander, and their right flank. I did choose a particular lord, but they've all just got the king's colours over there. Principal characters on this side. This right flank I've represented with William Stanley there, who by the way is the Stanley who actually occasionally did do some fighting, usually for Yorkists. Salisbury in the middle, and then lastly Salisbury had 2 of his Neville sons with him, not Warwick, who wasn't at this battle, but he had Montague there, who at this time is simply known as Sir John Neville, and Thomas Neville is in there somewhere as well on that side. There's no mention of any artillery in the accounts of the battle itself, but then there are lots of stories after the battle of the Yorkists firing off cannon into the night to make the other advancing armies of Henry believe that they were still around. So I decided that yeah, there would be artillery therefore in small numbers at this battle for the Yorkists. What happened in real life, in inverted commas, is the Yorkists you've got here are in a very defensive position, tight together, staked in, you know, reasonably well defended, experienced group of men, decided that they would attempt to trick the Lancastrians into a cavalry charge, or into breaking ranks effectively, by doing a feigned withdrawal. So essentially some of the Yorkist troops began to pack up and look like they were moving off. Tradition goes that the Lancastrians, or at least part of their army, fell for this, and a cavalry charge was launched across the Hemps Hill Brook in an attempt to run down what they expected to be an army that was making off, and they weren't. Instead they reformed, the Yorkists turned around and caught a lot of the Lancastrian army while it was trying to cross that brook, and used sort of archery power to pick them off as they were getting through the Hemps Hill Brook and then up the other side, which started off things in their favour. The real turning point, I suppose, is when Dudley dismounts after that cavalry attack fails and launches an attack on foot on this side, which ends in his death. Dudley takes over command at that point, but again that attack also fails, and by this point the Lancastrians have lost a significant amount of men, largely through being picked off and driven back down into that brook, and a rout starts. So the Lancastrians get overturned despite their massive numbers. In the game that we've just played, I played against my son, who's owing to restrictions at the minute, who's my only option really at the minute, realistically, to play a game with. He's only 7, but he picked up Billhooks rules reasonably quickly, quite enjoyed himself, and he absolutely battered me as well, because although his cavalry did largely the same thing, they stumbled across the water and got picked off a lot, he did well to follow up reasonably closely with a lot of his men-at-arms. His men-at-arms used that ford to get over a little quicker, and then they fanned out and went for my centre, and they battered Thomas Neville's unit, who turned and ran, which sparked a mass rout in the middle of my line, and he took 2 full units with him. That was the beginning of my end. So I tried to do what Salisbury tried to do in real life, which worked for a while until I got unlucky with the rout, and then I got tonked and turned over. I'll put some pictures up of some of the action that went on, but again it was a really enjoyable game of Billhooks rules, which worked well. This is significantly scaled up, so this is a couple of 100 points aside, Lancastrians more so in fact, so it's a more than double the size of a traditional Billhooks game. I accounted for that by making all the commanders level 3 commanders, so they can give out 3 tokens every time, or 3 actions, 3 commands, sorry, every time their card comes out, so things can keep moving quickly. It's a reasonably narrow table as well, so we got into engagement fairly quickly. And yeah, really good game. It's quite enjoyable because I've spent quite a lot of time getting the right flags and things for the commanders that I have used, that I do know were there. So at least in some ways visually they represent roughly what was on the field. And it was a really interesting game, given that you got to negotiate this terrain in the middle and everyone wants to avoid getting stuck in the river, so it was quite a good game. So yeah, thanks very much for watching. I enjoyed that. Next few projects, well, massive St Albans game coming up in May with some of the other Wars of Roses guys, looking forward to that, restrictions allowing. And I've got Battle of Northampton at some point next year as well, which will be the next battle I'll work towards, paint off a few more for that. Collection's going to keep on growing and growing and growing. We're at the sort of 500 point now, and I'm pushing towards that sort of 700 or 800 figure, which I said would be me done with Wars of Roses for the time being anyway. So yeah, thanks very much for watching. See you again soon.